path of Vedanta to innumerable people, giving us and making them also to tread the path of self-realization. But as our Kathopanishad says, Kshurasya dhara nishita duratyaya durgam patastat kavayo vadanti. This path is as sharp as razor's edge, and it's very difficult to traverse. It is filled with difficult terrains. It's a steepest path. But again, Kathopanishad itself says, Uttishtata Jagrata Prapya Varan Nibodhata. As Vivekananda says, arise and awake and stop not till the goal is reached. You all should not stop. We should try to continue traversing this path. How to traverse? By following the great acharyas like our Pravrajika Divyananda Prana Mataji, who is there with us in order to talk to all our students on this wonderful path of Vedanta, on self-knowledge, and on our personal journey. A few words of Mataji. Mataji is a monastic member of Sri Sharada Mutt and currently the editor of English journal Samvit, published from New Delhi. She has been the principal of Nivedita Vidya Mandir school from 2014 to 2019. She specializes in the areas of Yoga Vedanta. In addition of studying Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda literature, she has extensively studied the Yoga Vedanta text based on two twin philosophies, which include Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Raja Yoga, Upanishads, and Prakarana Granthas, or auxiliary scriptures of Vedanta like Vedanta Sara, Viveka Chudamani, along with their commentaries. Her additional interests include Brahma Sutras with Shankara's commentary, works of Sri Ramana Maharshi, and Bhagavad Gita. She is a gold medalist and a topper. She has a unique combination of knowledge in conventional sciences and traditional yogic and Vedantic text. She has been lecturing all over India since 2010, including Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, IIT Delhi. She has spoken many times in the Vivekananda Study Circle of IIT Delhi, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Mumbai, IIT Kanpur, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Delhi University, Vivekananda International Center, Ramakrishna Mission, engineering and medical colleges in Mumbai, Pune, Kolkata, and sometimes in schools. She offers courses on Yoga Vedanta every semester in IIT Delhi. The courses are available in YouTube. Internationally, she traveled to hold classes or deliver lectures in South Africa at Cape Town, Durban, Ladysmith, and Zulu Natal University, among the places. Subsequently, she traveled to Ireland, Great Britain, UAE, and recently to Canada for talks, lectures, and scriptural discussions. We request Mataji to talk to us, and we are very grateful for making time to talk to us. Thank you, Saira.
Namaste, everyone. Am I clearly audible?
You are audible, Mataji.
Yes. So it's such a beautiful ambience which you have created that my eyes are actually seeing all these little children sitting so methodically in rows, and the words which Bhupalji spoke about the institution, about the deep interest that is there in Yoga Vedant, it fills my heart with joy, really with great joy that I am with you today, that there is a whole community of such people, a whole university dedicated to human excellence, dedicated to spiritual values, and so aligned to the Vedantic culture. It's really a matter of pride for the whole nation. So it's a delight to be here today. And I have been asked to speak actually on self-knowledge, and especially with reference to my own personal journey in Vedanta. So just now you heard a kind of introduction given to me, but this kind of an introduction doesn't befit us actually speaking. For the simple reason, Vedanta begins with asking the real nature of our being. And that nature, our true self, it has absolutely no upadhis. It has absolutely no adjuncts, no titles, nothing. It is just of the nature of consciousness. It is just of the nature of pure consciousness, what we call the Atman. So the entire Indian philosophy, Indian spirituality is centered around this idea of the real nature of the human being. Anything else is an external objective imposition on the true self. And it doesn't actually define a person, so to say, because it is ever changing. Only the self of man, the Atman within us, that alone is the unchanging, eternal, infinite, ever-present factor which actually defines us, which actually, you can say, makes us what we are, which manifests through this body and mind. So this central point in Indian philosophy, Indian thinking, in our Vedic thought, this is something which we will go deep into today. Since there is so much of interest here, usually, when I speak in universities, I try to gauge the level of interest in the students and the faculty who ask for the lectures. And only if they are committed to Brahma Vidya, Atma Vidya, then I go very deep into it. Otherwise, I will only be talking about how mind management and how to improve the mind, how to control the mind, the different faculties of the human being, how to lead a better life and how to be successful in life. But here in this beautiful institution, which is dedicated to human excellence, I can see real interest in Atma Vidya. So let us only discuss this deep topic for today. And I am just now in the Himalayas. I'm in the Himalayas and I have come here for tapasya, and for a few months I will be here because I wanted to be away from the crowds and the classes of Delhi. And I decided that the summer should be spent here. So it's so calm here, so calm and still. And just when I step out of, I'm in a cottage, and when I step out of it, there are the mountains and deep forests. I'm about 12 kilometers above Nainital. So this is the place where Vedanta originated. This is the place where you can actually feel the stillness in the air, a kind of purity, clarity right in the air. So I have been deeply meditating on Vedantic truth here. And I have understood, I can say, that is the actual thing which everyone is asking for. That is what defines the human personality. That is what gives meaning to our human life. That is our very self, the core of our being. So who will not be interested in this knowledge? See, wherever I have spoken of, I find the greatest interest in Vedant for the simple reason it is dealing with your own real nature. It is not dealing with something which is external to us. It is not dealing with something objective to us. It is dealing with the supreme subject, the self. So how can we not be interested in this? As regards my own journey in Vedant, it began very early. So since you have asked for it, I will just briefly tell you that this journey, anybody who takes up the question, Koham, who am I? The earlier it is taken up, the better. And whoever takes it up in all seriousness and sincerity, everything will just fall from that person. Detachment is a natural thing which will occur for the simple reason the I sense in us is not connected to anything external. Everything external is an imposition on the I sense, but it is not in any way connected to it. You think and see for yourself. Anything that you collect in life. See, today you may be students, you are collecting degrees. Tomorrow you will be in the job market and you will be collecting jobs, you will be collecting money, you will be collecting titles, name, and then after that there will be a place for fulfillment in terms of a good home, family, titles, awards. So you are collecting things from the outside, and every collection is an imposition on the self. But there is something unchanging about you through your entire experience of life. That I sense remains as it is. That never changes. This sense of I am, being, pure being, this never changes in our life. So whoever pursues this inquiry in all its seriousness, he will understand that everything else is simply objective to it. It is not part of me at all. So detachment becomes easy. So my life also, this is what happened. So although I was deeply interested in studies and all, this entire research and discovery has to be made within oneself through the power of meditation, through the power of inquiry. There is something very deep about the human being. You see, the human species is the only species that walks erect on this earth. Think and see. Even the so-called vertebrates, they are all on all fours, except the human being. Yes, you may say chimpanzees are also walking on two legs, but they are still not completely erect. But the human being, he walks completely erect, so that his system is so made, his entire life force, pranic energy, can move upward. That is why his system is so made. And he has the most well-developed nervous system compared to any other animal, the brain and nervous system. It is a unique development. Out of eons of evolution, we have come to this point where the brain can grasp anything. The brain is capable of this inner research. The nervous system is so geared, it will take you in to the extent you want to go. So this is the uniqueness of the human experience. One who realizes this will consider his body and mind to be holy, like a temple, because it houses the human soul, the Atman. So then what? How do we treat it? You must treat it like a temple. The body and the mind, both instruments given to us to attain the knowledge of the self and to bring that knowledge to do great good to the world through the power of that knowledge. So this is how I saw the human life. And as a result, I joined the order also quite early, because you see, this discovery, it is a personal search, a personal research, and a personal realization also. But that realization has enormous effects in the world. One who grasps self-knowledge within oneself is able to do vast changes in the world. This has been proved by all the saints and sages of the past. Because once you bring this instrument under control in your hands, you are able to control almost everything in the external world. So this knowledge becomes paramount in human development and growth. That is why we say yoga is at the center of human development. So with this aim, we joined the order with the sole purpose of God realization. And I found that it provides you with a holy, pure atmosphere for sadhana. It provides you with all that is required for sadhana. Most of all, there's a long period given to you in order to change your sanskars, practice spiritual discipline, and commit yourself to these higher ideals in life. And as a result, attain self-knowledge, not as a glimpse, but to get established in what we are calling pure being, the knowledge of the Atman. So the order gives you the ambience for this. And that is why we join. There's a whole course of training after that, and long years spent in meditation and service. Our order also is very service-oriented, because service is taken as a form of worship of the Supreme Lord in all beings, not as a form of work, not as a form of contribution, but as serving the Lord present in all beings. So then, after a great studies, we are initiated into monastic life. And my own journey has been very fulfilling, because I am happy in the order, and it gives you most of all the conditions required for Brahma Vidya, there is a whole ambience of study, deep study and meditation. And of course, we have centers like this, the Presence Center where I am, which is in the retreat house in the Himalayas in Pangot. So we have places like this where from time to time one can practice intense spiritual practice. And as you know, Sharda Mission is a completely independent women's monastic order. In fact, it's the largest women's monastic order in the world. And it was born out of Vivekananda's vision. He wanted two separate mutts, one for men and one for women. So Ramakrishna Mutt was created for men, and Sharda Mission, which came up much later, it was created for women. But first on Vivekananda's list was Sharda Mission, actually. So today there are a number of girls and women in the order who have totally committed their lives to this knowledge and to service of humankind. So this has been my personal journey, and you already saw that I have been traveling quite a lot in order to spread this knowledge. But one thing should be clear: Brahma Vidya is not spread by traveling about this. Then what's the purpose of all this? See, Brahma Vidya, or the knowledge of the self, Atma Vidya. Yes, somebody said something, Bhupalji?
It was a small commotion, nothing. You can continue, Mataji.
Okay. So this form of knowledge, the only way one can get it is by diving deep within oneself. As a result of that, the original first-hand knowledge that is God, and the power of mind that naturally comes with this penetration, through that power of mind, you can bring about a lot of change in the world. You can affect the world. But this knowledge is not, you can't even speak about it, actually speaking. You know, it is not meant to be talked about from podiums and all that. If you see the lives of the great sages of India, take the life of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, take the life of Sri Satya Sai Baba, take the life of Vivekananda, Raman Maharshi, they were silent preachers. They just dived into the knowledge. And finally, they became conduits for the divine power to bring that knowledge into this world, to inspire a whole multitude of people. So the actual force of self-knowledge lies in a life of tapasya and sadhana. We must not make this mistake. It is not about spreading a knowledge, because you see, this knowledge is not objective knowledge. It's not like your physics, chemistry, mathematics. It's not something that is available on Google. You won't get it that way. It is a knowledge which is born in the heart of your being. It is a realization, in fact. What is the difference between a knowledge and a realization? Knowledge means knowing something objectively. Even the subject, some people try to know it objectively. But realization means getting into touch with truth, which is always present, never absent. I came to know of it just now, so I realized that it exists, but it is ever present truth. So the nature of our self is like that. It is existence, consciousness, and bliss, ever present. You have to know it by diving into it. There is no other way of knowing it. You cannot even know it through the scriptures. You cannot know it through any objective means. You can only know it by turning the mind within, by understanding the heart of your being. And then only you get the power to transmit this knowledge, or the clarity to convey this knowledge further on. But without this tapasya, without this sadhana, it is next to impossible. Even Vivekananda went out and preached this knowledge only after he had experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi, only after he was well established in this knowledge. So the primary thing about self-knowledge is turning the mind within. The mind is constantly running outward. We make efforts. This is tapasya. You turn it within again and again. and try to search the core of your being, your I amness. What is it? Trying to search out that originally by oneself in the first person. There is no third person research here. It's all first person research, and the lab is this body and mind. So when you penetrate into it like this, you will understand that the core of your being is only pure consciousness. It is neither body nor mind. It is not even mind. It is not the intellect. It is not the Vijnanmay Kosh even. It is not even the Anandmay Kosh. It is pure awareness. Because it is conscious by itself, it's called consciousness. It is self-luminous by itself. The only thing that is Swayam Prakash, self-luminous by itself, is consciousness, pure awareness. If you penetrate, that is why I'm telling you, freeing the mind from everything and turning it within, penetrating into the core of your being. That is all that is required for self-knowledge. But you have to do it by yourself, within yourself, and like a tapasya, like a sadhana. So establishment in that is most important to be able to do anything for the world in this regard. This is so very important, because you see, until you enter that state, you will have no clue of what it is like. This you can know for certain. You cannot describe it in any available to the intellect, nor to the mind, nor to the speech. That is the nature of this knowledge. I give this example. If suppose, excuse me, suppose you were standing on a beach and I asked you to describe the ocean. How would you describe the ocean for me from the beach? You would say, oh, it is vast, it is blue, and it stretches to the horizons. This is how you would describe the ocean. But if I told you now, please enter the waters, step into the waves, and once you have stepped in, now you please describe the ocean to me. How will you describe the ocean then? It will be something completely different. You will say the ocean is warm or cold. The feel of water, which you will describe, will be completely different. So the very description of the ocean changes. So this is the point I'm trying to make. Unless you enter into Atma Vidya, into the state of pure awareness, you cannot describe it in any way. There's no preaching or prattling about it. In fact, all knowers of this Vidya were silent souls, because they knew it cannot be expressed. By the power of their personality, all changes were made. But the Vidya itself is like this. You can only know it by entering into it. Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. So then sadhana is all important, isn't it? Sadhana becomes all important, because if you have to enter into it, just the study of scriptures is not enough. Just the objective knowledge of it. Today in universities and colleges, we give a lot of ideas from Patanjali Yoga Sutras, from the Upanishads, in order to help them solve their everyday problems like stress, mind management. This is a completely different paradigm. This knowledge which originated in the Vedas, this knowledge which originated in the Yoga Sutras, the purpose of this knowledge is not mere mind management or removing stress and all that. The purpose of this knowledge is Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of reality, the knowledge of truth. So in order to know it, you must enter into it. That is the essential thing. That is why sadhana, a particular technique to go into this, take up any technique. There are hundreds of yogic techniques, Vedantic upasanas, Vedantic vichar techniques. You have heard of Koham vichar, Neti Neti, the different vidyas, the upasana techniques, Vedantic meditations, Ahamgraha upasana techniques. So many such are there. And in yoga, there are innumerable techniques. In Buddhism, there are innumerable techniques. So take up some technique which appeals to you and dive into sadhana. That is the most important thing about this knowledge. It is sadhana based. I am teaching contemplative studies in a university, actually, SSU in Cuttack. And there, I designed the practicals in such a way they must be able to feel the truth of existential inquiry. जिसको हम वेदांत विचार कहते हैं. Vedanta vichar, they must be able to feel the truth of that in the practical. So I have designed meditations like that. Even if you go to YouTube, you just give Yoga Vedanta meditation, you will get Yoga Vedanta meditation. 5-minute meditations which were given to the IITs, that kind of meditation you will get. So the thing is to practice something, because the feel of awareness will not come through as long as the thought process is active. So it's not about subtle thinking. It is not about some form of mind manipulation. It is about transcending the mind. It is going beyond vrittis. And then only this knowledge is possible. See, the first 4 sutras of Patanjali Yoga Sutras makes it so clear. What is the purpose of yoga? Atha yoga anushasanam. Now we will study yoga. The second sutra itself says, yogastu chitta vritti nirodh. Yoga is the stopping of the waves of the mind. The stopping of the modifications of the mind. Why? Why should you stop the modifications of the mind? Because otherwise, tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. For that purpose, the drashta, so that he goes into his real nature, the witness consciousness, so that it resolves into pure awareness. Because without stopping the waves of the mind, this witness consciousness will take the nature of those waves. It will get joined with the modifications of the mind. Vritti sarupyam itaratra, the 4th sutra says. So that this does not happen, the aim of yoga is to stop the modifications of the mind. So please understand, these are all the most practical things you would do naturally if you are after Brahma Vidya. You will stop the modifications of the mind, because see, our entire experience of life is through the mind. And it is all based, if you corner the experience, you will see it is all vritti based. Now you want to know the heart of human experience. You cannot know it through vrittis. You have to stop the vrittis or bring in Vedanta, which are Vedantic vrittis, so that you are led to Atma Vidya. So this is the fundamental premise. Chitta vritti nirodh. What happens as a result? What happens when you do Chitta vritti nirodh? It will become very clear that you are more aware than identified with thoughts. This is a state to be experienced, not to be learnt, not to be just studied like that. If you, in a completely conscious yogic state, stop the modifications of your mind, you will understand you are more aware than identified with anything. You are never identified with the body, never identified with your thought process unless you want to be. So capturing this state is very important. In the first person, by oneself, in your own system. Once you capture this, you will know how to go into the knowledge of the Atman, because you understand your nature is pure awareness. So the more stilling you are able to do within yourself, the more you will understand awareness has the deep, in its deepest dimension, is called the Atman. And it is not your awareness, it is you the awareness. There it doesn't become your awareness, like your body and mind. You are the awareness. That shining, everything else shines as a vritti in that awareness. So in you, both the subject and the object shine. You are pure awareness, which is conscious by itself. That is why it is called consciousness. And everything else which the world calls you is a superimposition on this, without any, your name, whatever you are known to be, your talents, your capacities, your qualifications, your titles, your jobs, and your home, and everything else that you have collected in your life. Everything else is an imposition on you. It doesn't define you. Only pure awareness defines you. So capturing this in the first person becomes all important. Name and form is unreal. Meditation will naturally lead you to this. A sharp distinction between the real and the unreal will come into our life. You see, Vivek is the starting point of everything in Vedanta. Clear discrimination, a clear buddhi. As a result, Vairagya will develop naturally. If there is Vivek, there will be Vairagya. Wherever there is no Vairagya, you will see there is no sharp discrimination at all. There's no Vivek. So these are all the preliminaries of Vedanta. Vivek, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, which includes Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan. Which is actually Shama is control of the senses, Dhamma, control of the mind, then Uparati, detachment, ability to withdraw the mind from objects. Titiksha is forbearance. Shraddha is deep faith or conviction in the nature of the self. Samadhan is focus. And the last qualification for Vedanta is mumukshutvam, which is deep desire for liberation, liberation from the conditionings of the mind, liberation from the mind itself into the heart of awareness. So these qualifications will come by themselves if there is initial Vivek, a sharp distinction between the real and the unreal, the temporary and the eternal, that which ever is and that which never is. So all this is beautifully illustrated in the Vedanta in the form of stories. So here I can go into one story which will help you understand the nature of self-knowledge. So this you may already have studied it. It is the story from the Chandogya Upanishad on Shvetaketu. It's a beautiful story if any of you have studied it. And it is clearly pointing to us that reality is not invented or discovered. It is ever there. You only have to notice it. You only have to clear your head, clear your mind and intellect through sadhana so that you discover the ever-existent reality. So always remember, self-knowledge is of the nature of realization. You realize something which is always there. The self is not created nor invented. It is just discovered by the clarity of your mind. So this story shows us this point very clearly. So Shvetaketu is the son of Uddalak, and the father is very keen on educating his son well. So in the Vedic age, whatever the education was available in terms of this Vedic lore and Sanskrit language, and of course the etymology, Niruktam, Kavya, the grammar which was available, poetry, all of this. For him to learn all of this, the father sends Shvetaketu to a guru, to a preceptor. Now for 12 long years, Shvetaketu is in his guru's ashram, doing seva, learning the scriptures, learning all that the guru had to teach him. And after 12 years, he completes his education and he comes home. Now, Uddalak notices that now his son is a young man of great learning and very intelligent. Shvetaketu was very intelligent by nature. Only unfortunately, he notices a little pride has come from somewhere. Now, Vidya Dadati Vinayam. Because he knows whatever he learns, it is just a speck compared to all that is there to be known. So he can never be proud. He is the very embodiment of humility. And humility means actually unself-consciousness, not just acting humble. So he sees that Shvetaketu lacks. So the father feels very hurt and he calls Shvetaketu to him. The young man comes and then the father says, look, my son, do you know that knowing which everything is known? Just like how if I know this lump of clay, he lifts a little bit of mud from the ground and shows his son. If I know this lump of clay, I can know everything that is made up of that is made up of clay. Like for example, I know the pot, I know the ladle, I know everything that you can make from that clay. So also there is one substance, one eternal substance in this universe, knowing which you can know everything about this world of manifestation. Do you have any clue about that? So then Shvetaketu says, no, I have not heard anything like that, father. Then the father says, my son, there is something. There is one eternal substance of the nature of consciousness. Everything else is a manifestation of that, name and form superimposed on that. Then he gives this example. You see, just take a pot. You can study it in your own way, wherever you are. Take any object that is close to you and you can study this example that way. So Uddalak takes a pot and says, look, my son, is this more pot or more clay? So think and see, is it more pot or more clay? So the answer is, it is more clay, because clay can exist without the pot, but the pot cannot exist without the clay, isn't it? The pot is only clay in a name and a form. Clay with a name and a form is called pot. There is nothing called a pot apart from clay. So also look at the table on which we are using. It is nothing but wood with a name and form, isn't it? So then I can say that the pot is an appearance of clay. The table is an appearance of wood. Ornaments are appearances of gold. Waves are appearances of water. So you are an appearance of Brahman, consciousness. Name and form is superimposed on consciousness to make a you. So this is your identity. Your own identity is being discussed in this story. So then Shvetaketu gets the jerk of his life. And he starts thinking, yes, what he says is true. Name and form superimposed on my true being is what constitutes me. So then suddenly he is very interested in this. And he says, Father, tell me more. And Uddalak says, you are verily consciousness Brahman, upon which a name and form has been superimposed. Why do you take pride in merely the name and form? Everything what you take pride in is an imposition on your true nature. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu, you are of the nature of Brahman. Tattvamasi, again and again it is repeated in the Chandogya Upanishad. What a beautiful Mahavakya this is. You are verily that. Tat Tvamasi. Brahman, you verily art. So in this way, Shvetaketu is made to understand that his own nature is Brahman. The story goes on further. I'll just give you a little bit more, and then maybe we should conclude this and take up your questions on this. But the story goes like this. Now Shvetaketu is very interested and he asks Uddalak, tell me something more about this. And then Uddalak Muni says, my son, there is a Nyagrodha tree, a banyan tree. Get me a fruit of that tree. So Shvetaketu runs up and brings a fruit of the tree, and the father starts pounding it. So he makes it smaller and smaller and goes to the seeds, pounds the seeds. Finally, there is nothing left. And then he says, look, my son, what do you see here? He says, I see nothing. Out of this nothing, this tree has emerged, this vast banyan tree. Just think and see, the seeds themselves are so minute. And if you pound them, you finally get nothing. But out of this substance, this vast tree has come out. So also out of that Brahman, which you cannot see, which you cannot feel with your senses, out of that has emerged this entire universe, this manifold diversity, multiplicity. It has arisen from that. That is the essence of life, consciousness. How will you ever enjoy life or know life without touching that consciousness? Tattvamasi Shvetaketu, you are verily that. You are Brahman, insinuating, appearing as Shvetaketu. Understand this. So this is what should be said to all of you also. You are verily Brahman, appearing in this particular name and form at this particular point of time. You are nothing different. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. Then now Shvetaketu is deeply interested in the story. Then further Uddalak says, my son, bring a cup of water and a pinch of salt. Now dissolve the salt in the water and tell me, how does the water taste? It tastes saline. And it tastes saline at the bottom, in the middle, and on top. Then Uddalak says, look, just like how this salt has dissolved completely in water and made the entire water saline, Brahman is dissolved in this universe. And that is why there is life everywhere. The expression of Brahman, the manifestation of Brahman is what is called life. When it is through this particular wiring, the body and the mind complex, it is expressed as a human life. But the same consciousness is manifesting in all beings under different forms, under different names, but one consciousness. You see, even thinking about this is something so liberating for the mind. One consciousness expressing itself in different names and forms. You see, the light in your eyes is verily the light in the eyes of your neighbor. The light in everyone's eye is Brahman. One consciousness alone. Manifestation appears different. That's why it's an appearance, but one substance. So the heart of this world of manifestation lies in unity, in actually Brahman, in one substance. So this has been the unitary perception of the great sages of India. You take the life of any sage, you will find him infinitely loving, compassionate, all encompassing, all inclusive, for the simple reason he sees one in everything. That is why he can say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This world is indeed one family. Yatra Vishwam Bhavati Ekanidam, Mahanarayana Upanishad says, where the whole world is nestled in one nest. This is the nature of their experience of the world, because they see one absolute, inexpressible reality manifested in everything. So if we want to be compassionate, loving, if we want to give service in this world, if we want to contribute and fulfill our lives, you must learn to touch this Brahma Vidya, this self-knowledge first. It will make you naturally like that. Otherwise, we stand on an ego which has absolutely no foundation, no definition. You see the common man's life. 50% life has gone in building an ego, the other 50% goes in defending it, without ever scrutinizing it, without ever investigating into it. What is the nature of this ego? What do I mean by I? This never strikes them. So this is sheer waste of human energy, human resource, and human life. If you, at this age, young age, you touch Brahma Vidya, you get established in this knowledge, you will be the torchbearers of change, I'm telling you. You will make vast changes in this world because all power lies there. Vivekananda used to say this, all power lies within you. First discover that source of power. First dive into Atma Vidya. This is the way to bring fulfillment into your lives. If this is the goal, immediate goal, I'm telling you, each one of you will be able to contribute to this world. And that is the purpose of this study. So I am really pleased that you chose Brahma Vidya, self-knowledge, as the topic for today's talk. And I'm sure so many of the youngsters who are here are deeply inclined towards this. It was a joy for me to share my journey in this also towards this knowledge with you. The essential thing is you must take inspiration from people like us, but you must dive into sadhana yourself. Even now, the primary part of my life is sadhana, not preaching and teaching. That I hold to be secondary and tertiary. But the primary thing is sadhana. Dive into the nature of the self. That is all that is required to be done. This is your primary duty. Everything else comes next. Wherever you are, you don't have to run away anywhere. Wherever you are, dive into this knowledge. This is the most essential point I would like to make. So we will stop the talk here and take up your questions on this topic for the next 15 minutes. Is this okay, Bhupalji?
Yes, Mataji, we will take up questions. We have a lot of questions also. So what I'll be doing is I'll be typing the questions in the chat box so that it will be easy for you to read. So I'm typing.
Okay, you can even read.
Okay, Mataji. When we are on the path of spirituality, how do we know whether we are still in the clutches of mind modifications? When we are in the path of spirituality, how do we know whether we are... whether we are still in the clutches of mind modifications?
Yes. See, as long as you are in the clutches of mind modification, even awareness will appear like a thought. This is how you should know. Even awareness will appear like a thought. I'm thinking of Brahman. There is no thinking of Brahman. If you stop the modifications of your mind in a yogic state, you enter into the state of pure awareness. So there is no thinking of Brahman, you become Brahman. So this is only possible through sadhana. Please know. देखिए, ऐसे ही आप अगर बैठ के, now let me stop thinking for a few seconds. If you think like this, don't think Brahma Gnan is going to come. It has to be done yogically, which means you are stopping the modifications of the mind in meditation in a perfectly conscious state. This requires training. And most of all, it requires brahmacharya. Because, that is a faculty which you develop, the medha faculty, which gives you a direct insight into the nature of pure awareness. You enter the state. So along with all these tools, if you dive into the state of non-modification of mind, you will enter into the state of pure awareness. That is why I insisted sadhana is required. Otherwise, even awareness will appear like a thought.
How can students who are pursuing their postdoctoral studies or research studies and still balance their sadhana and education?
Yes. So see, it's not difficult because the same mind which you are applying in meditation, that very focused, subtle, powerful mind, the same mind is getting its higher education also. It in fact becomes easy if you are a sadhak. It becomes easy to pursue your education. You won't have to give so much time because your mind is already so refined and concentrated. And you see, I personally am working in 2 universities. Let me tell you, I'm actually teaching at IIT Delhi, and I'm teaching at SSU, and taking a whole lot of classes in addition to all this. And I'm the editor of a magazine, and I have to take classes even for the inmates here. So I'm engaged in a whole lot of things, but I don't feel that way because you see, the subject matter you are dealing with is common. And meditation, the art of emptying mind, itself will give you insight into the state of pure awareness. So that kind of a mind becomes very powerful. You can easily combine your education and sadhana, meditative practice. They are never in contradiction with each other. In fact, a sadhak will naturally be a topper. So try it out and see.
Okay. Pranams Mataji, as you mentioned that ornament as an appearance of gold, if we say it is a manifestation rather than appearance, then what is the subtle difference?
Yes. So manifestation of gold, it appears definitely. Manifestation of gold, this is how you start thinking of it in the beginning. But you will see that every manifestation is only an appearance. Is there anything in that ornament which defines the ornament permanently? It is actually only gold in a particular name and form. That is why we are calling it an appearance. The ornament has no identity in itself apart from gold. Isn't it?
Yes.
Because it has no identity apart from gold, we call it a mere appearance. So this is the language of Advait Vedant, which tells you that anything which has no permanent identity is only an appearance. But in Vishishtadvaita Vedant, they will tell you, yes, it's only a manifestation and it has also its own kind of identity. So it all depends on how acutely you see it. How acutely you see it. For a totally non-discriminating mind, the ornament is something very precious. You use it to decorate your body. But from when it is perceived with a keen eye, you will see it is nothing apart from gold. So the name and form you have given to it is only an appearance. So this is Advaita Vedanta's standpoint. Intellectually, you must decipher it out yourself and draw your own conclusions and philosophy of life out of it. That is the whole point.
As a student of both Paravidya and Aparavidya, what is the best sadhana that you recommend us to practice?
So the best sadhana, I would say, is learn the art of supreme concentration. No matter what you do, Paravidya, whether you are focused on Paravidya or Aparavidya, whatever you do at that time, that should be 100% your focus, your entire focus and energy should be on that. That is the way to achieve excellence. Train your attention so that it does not flicker from what you are doing. This is tapasya.
When and how did this desire to walk on renunciation path occur to you? And how did you surmount the social obstacles that would have inevitably come up about this choice?
Yes. So I was deeply inclined to all this from a very young age. In fact, many people may find this hard to believe, but by the age of 13, 14, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita myself, making my own notes. In fact, I wrote a book on Bhagavad Gita at that time. And then by the age of 16, 17, I was certain that my path in life would be a path of primarily of meditation and inner research and vichar, inquiry. And I was deeply attracted towards the scriptures, Upanishads, and Sri Ramakrishna's life, Holy Mother's pure life, and Raman Maharshi's works. And I got initiated through my guru was the most revered Swami Ranganathaji Maharaj at a very tender age. I was just 16 like that. So that time only I was meditating quite a lot. And I understood that's the only sane state of existence. When you have removed everything from mind, you are just conscious and aware. That's the sanest state of existence. So I decided quite early that a meditative life would suit me. And of course, obstacles will be there. Anybody who chooses this path, a whole lot of people will be against it because they have not tasted this. No, what can they do? Not that they are against you. They are just against their higher faculties. They have not tasted this. What can they do? So then my will was adamant, actually. I was adamant on this point because everybody has the right to lead their life as they want it to be, isn't it? So even when I joined the order, not that the family is very supportive, but gradually they understood that her heart and soul is in this. And in a few years' time, they were all telling me, it's actually you have taken the best path. And even my teachers, my college professors and all, they also had come. And they told me, because I was a gold medalist and all that, told me that, why did you do this? And they were also happy in a few years' time because everybody, today, the VCs and professors of so many universities come to me for this knowledge. And I have a whole lot of people. In fact, so many universities are asking for this that I don't know how to meet those demands. Everybody is only asking for this, actually. That's why I have escaped to this Himalayas to get some quiet time here. So I can tell you this, that if you dive into what you hold to be really worthy in human life, what you think is your calling, you will contribute enormously to this world. There's no doubt about it. Essential thing is the sincerity of purpose. And especially in monastic life, especially in this life, where you are searching for something so subtle and so something which is so deep right within yourself, you need 101% sincerity in the sadhana. If you do that, the whole world will follow you. I can guarantee you that.
Thank you. How do we know that? How do we know that we are progressing in this path? What is the yardstick to measure our progress?
Yes, that's a beautiful question. So how do we know? First, you know it by the inner fulfillment that you feel, the inner satiation that you feel, and you know it by the sheer purity of your life. You feel free from within. These are the yardsticks. Does this make sense?
Yes, Mataji.
Hmm.
Okay. Do thoughts?
So no, you don't have to take anybody's.
Yes, Mataji, you can continue.
You don't have to take anybody's confirmation, I said. Your own mind will be so happy, your own being will be so bubbly joy that you know you are on the right path. Yes.
Do thoughts also rise from nothingness and merge into nothingness?
No, thoughts do not rise from nothingness. Thoughts rise from the sense impressions you have taken in. What decides the content of your thought world? What you took in through your eyes, what you took in through your ears, that creates the modifications in your mind, the vrittis in your mind. So, and nor do they merge in nothingness. A thought, once it is encouraged on the conscious plane and repeated there, it will go into the subconscious and become a sanskar. It doesn't dissolve anywhere. आपके वृत्ति आपके संस्कार बनते हैं. So once they have become your sanskars or strong impressions in your subconscious, they will again keep blossoming into memories and thoughts in your conscious mind. So this cycle goes on day and night. They don't dissolve into nothingness unless you practice yoga. It is through the power of meditation and yoga that you can stop thought, you can pause thought, you can eradicate thought. Not until then.
When was the first time you experienced oneness, and can you describe it?
So, see, it is only, according to me, it is in the heart of meditation that you experience oneness. As you go on practicing meditation, gradually it becomes the normal perception. But initially, it is in the heart of meditation that you experience oneness. When you touch your own core reality, you will see that everybody is that reality in another form. But if you have not touched your own core reality, and everybody will appear like a form. So you feel everybody is different from everybody else. So the essential thing, that's why I told you, is sadhana, to dive into oneself and know our own real nature. Then you will understand that everybody is only manifesting that same nature. The same consciousness is getting manifested. So for me, it was a meditative experience that gave me insight into the reality of Vedanta. And that once you get it, you will want to repeat it again and again. It's so blissful. So that's why I lead actually a strongly meditative life. If you see YouTube, you may feel I'm doing a lot of teaching and preaching. That is all secondary. It is not even in my mind. Mainly it is meditative life. And that's why I am constantly reclusive by nature. I run away to places like this where I am at present. And I enjoy the quiet, the stillness, and do a lot of meditation.
Thank you, Mataji. We have gone through all the questions, especially the point which you mentioned that if we stick on to our inner calling, though society might initially object us, but finally they will accept us and we can do the wonders. And the second point which you emphasized on the importance of inner sadhana, only through inner sadhana, after touching that Brahma Vidya, if we enter the world, we might do wonders, like said in the motto of Ramakrishna Mission, Atmano Mokshartam Jagaditaya Cha. Once that Atma Kalyana happens, Loka Kalyana happens automatically. These points really mean a lot to us. And we ask for your blessings to all our boys and girls to travel in this path, to touch the Brahma Vidya, and let God act through us whatever He wills. Let Ramakrishna, Sharada Ma act through us whatever they will, whatever consciousness will, let it happen. And we look forward for more such blessings and talks from you. Thanks a lot from Sri Satya Sai University for Human Excellence.
Yes.
We were very pleased to have you. Thank you, Sai Ram.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Om Sai Ram.
We will end the session with the Sahana Bhavatu prayer.
Yes.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Mataji.
Om Sai Ram.
Sai Ram.